Hello, everyone, and welcome to the ESG-CV Quarterly Reporting Office Hours. My name is Tommy Joe Bednar, and I'm going to cover just a couple of tech and housekeeping information before we dive in today. First and foremost, we hope that you are able to hear us now and that you'll be able to hear us throughout the webinar. While everyone is muted, you'll be able to ask questions, share experiences, make comments through the chat box. We hope that you connect to audio via the phone number on the screen today. While you might be connected via your computer right now, you get a little bit of better phone quality using the call-in number. I've also added that call-in number to the chat box now. Speaking of the chat box, as I said, we hope that you'll use that for questions, comments for our wonderful presenters today. To open the chat box, click on the little bubble in the bottom right-hand corner of your screen that says chat and has a little bubble there. It's highlighted in red on the screenshot now. Go ahead and click that and it'll open a chat window on the right-hand side of your screen. And then please make sure that your to field says everyone. That will make sure that all of your questions, comments, and shared experiences will go to all of the other attendees today, as well as our wonderful panelists. A recording of today's session, along with the slide deck and all of the materials, will be posted to the HUD Exchange in about 2 to 3 business days. Just give us a little bit of time to get those up and ready for you all. Now with that, I just want to note that today's presenters are William Snow from HUD, the Office of Special Needs Assistance Programs, Michelle Budzik from the Partnership Center, and some other staff and support from App Associates and from the Partnership Center. With that, I'm going to go ahead and hand things over to William Snow. William?
All right. Thanks, Tommy Joe. Just a reminder that this is an ESG-CV quarterly reporting office hours. We don't plan on addressing questions that are not tied to reporting. We may know some of the answers, and if we know them, we will respond to them about other topics, but really the focus of this will be on reporting. I am going to apologize up front. Marlisa Grogan and I are going to be doing some changing of seats during some of this due to our various conflicts. So one of us will be on at all times, but it will be switching places at some point. So today we're going to answer hopefully some important questions that you had even in the last round, right? And a lot of them are around the, well, what if I didn't get a project in the initial quarter? And what happens if I start a new project now? Those are the types of things that we knew were coming. We're prepared to answer. We're working on finalizing some guidance that we'll publish soon, but really the content of that will be discussed today. So looking forward to that. And thank you again for showing up to the call with relatively quick notice. We're sorry we didn't give you more of a heads up, but glad you could join today and looking forward to jumping into this topic. So next slide, please. All right, our favorite topic of roles. Just a reminder, recipient's the one who gets the money directly from HUD. They're the ones who execute the grant agreement with HUD. They're the ones who log into Sage, set up bundles, and get everything prepared in Sage, and will be the ones to finally submit the actual report. So I think we still even have a few lingering questions from the last round. There were a few folks who said our HMIS lead submitted everything, and our response is, that's great, but you're the one who submits, right? So it's still not submitted because it actually is with you. So just a reminder, the recipient is the one who ultimately submits the report to HUD. So what's the role of the subrecipient? The role of the subrecipient is to collect the data, and that's it, unless they're a victim service provider. They're a victim service provider. They're collecting the data in the comparable database, and they will also be uploading that data. So they will provide an import from their system. Subrecipients, again, collecting data, just like the subrecipient. So they're the ones who are making sure they're following or spending the money in the right ways. They're tracking that. Something we've been focusing on is the people side, right, reporting on client served. We found in the last reporting period there were definitely a lot of complications around reporting money. With HMIS, we provide you some help on getting your data out, but we don't provide you any help on the financial side. We expect recipients to establish their own system, the system that makes the most sense to them, and work with your subrecipients to submit the data on time. So hopefully you worked through some of those kinks last time, If not, we're going to need you to do that this time because that's really important. We'll provide a few suggestions around that should help you, but I think the gist of it is for each time you're going to be submitting on the previous quarter, you should ask that your subrecipients provide all your data by the 15th of the month. So if you're reporting on last quarter, your January 15th, you should have all of that data. So we just ask that you implement a local process that hopefully gets you there. The other actors are the HMIS leads and the victim service providers. They will be notified of their participation by email because they'll be requested to provide data in a bundle. Again, it is the recipient who sets up the bundle and has the contact information for the leads and the victim service provider. And through the email from the bundle creation, the HMIS lead comes into play. They will export their data based on the parameters of the bundle, right? That sets up what projects should be included, what time frame is included. So that's the key there. They'll generate the bundles, and then again, it goes back to the recipient after all the data is uploaded to make sure everything is correct and hit that submit button. There's one role that we should address that's not on here, the role of the COC. So a COC has no role in SAGE. But COCs have unique roles in helping things get facilitated correctly, right? COCs can help ensure recipients are submitting the data. They can help their HMIS leads ensure that they have the time and space to provide the data for the reporting. But again, no direct role in SAGE. They technically don't have to play a direct role in the quarterly reporting process, but we know that you're working behind the scenes, helping things move forward, and we appreciate that. Next slide, please. With that, I am going to turn it over to Michelle, and she's going to walk us through some of the fun details for today.
Thanks, William. So we're going to just walk through the changes that we made in SAGE to make this work for you for Q1 reporting and things you need to know. So we're not going to rehash if you've already reported things, but we're gonna take a look at some new things. So first of all, on your submission launchpad, you see there's always a status indicator, and if your status is listed as in progress or not started for this first initial period, you have to do that one before the next one will be even available to you to work on. So if you are a person with an in progress or not started status, you need to be submitting those now so that the next one will open and you can get prepared for it. Everybody else will have a second launchpad on their dashboard, and you'll be using then that second one. I've had them put in whether it was just the initial period or Q numbers in here just the other day, so you'll be able to even identify it better than by kind of the dates that just swim at you. So I think that might help you too to figure out which one you're on. The slide will not turn. Tommy Joe, you're going to have to turn them. The slides won't turn for me. Thank you. I'm sorry about this. We're going to take a look at the reporting requirements form. The reporting requirements, that was bad. The reporting requirements form is on SAGE where it says start here, and you have to fill this form out. This form drives the rest of the APR, or the CAPR submission, the CAPR report. It also signifies to HUD what they're going to have to be reviewing, and it signifies to Sage some of the stuff that is kind of calculated or generated for the field offices to review. So at this point, I hope that all of you have your grant agreement signed and that you've begun making expenditures and you're saying yes to both of those. And then this, once you say yes to have you made expenditures, this will open and you will check what activities you are doing with ESG-CV. Now, if you checked an activity last time, like, just say training, and that was all you did, training is still going to be on. You're not going to be able to turn it off because in the course of ESG-CV, you did do training. So that's always going to stay on, but you may add as many other things as come up. So if, this year you're funding emergency shelter and rapid rehousing, but maybe by June of next year you start doing homelessness prevention, then in the quarter that you report that, you'll just check the extra box. Once you save that, then you'll move on to all of the forms that are open in Sage for you. Next slide, please. We heard you loud and clear, and from the lack of submissions with CSV uploads, submissions that had been serving clients, we recognized that something had to be done to be able to let you guys go back to the initial period for just a variety of legitimate reasons, right? You were waiting for FEMA to decide, or you didn't have everybody, some of your subcontractors under contract. And so you have projects that were actually operating in the initial period that you've not ever reported on. So if that happened, where the project was operating and you didn't put it in the initial period, now in Q1, you're going to be able to add that project. So you simply click Add a New Project, and you fill out the new project, and then when you get to the dates, you're going to see your reporting start date. That's the date you set in the initial period. You're going to see that reporting start date show as a selection choice. So you can start the project back to wherever your report start date was, or you can start the project in October, November, and December, whichever month in this quarter you've actually started the project. If you select your initial reporting start date, that's 7/1 date in this example, if you select that, then on your Launchpad, you're going to see an additional form. It's numbered 3A, where HUD is going to ask you to provide a brief narrative of why the projects are newly entered in this submission and were not reported on the previous period. And that requires more than a half a sentence. So if you could really be clear and explain to them why the delay, that would be helpful. If you've missed the project in the initial report, you're also going to be able to add that expenditure, the expenditures for that project or any other expenses that you missed in the first initial report on your financial form. You're going to put all the expenses to date in the this quarter form that you have not yet reported to HUD. So there's a cumulative column on the form that you'll see what you reported last time. There's also a this quarter column on the form, and that's you're going to put the finances for anything from the time you started the project until the end of the year that you have not already reported to HUD. The new projects won't have their own quarterly bundle because they should have been in the last quarterly bundles, and we're not going to reopen them and go through all of that. So they will not have a Q1, they will not be in a Q1 bundle, but they will be in the cumulative bundle that begins this quarter. So we'll pick up on what happened last time by the difference in those reports. We don't want you to have to redo any data or to reopen any initial report or to change anything that's out there right now. Let's go to the next slide, please. For projects that started late, so they weren't in the initial period. They're just late starters. We've talked about these before. If you've been on training before, we talk about them in the guides. If they're just late starters, that means that they started in October, November, or December 2020. And so you're just going to simply add that project to the list of projects that you already have on your page. If there's anything else to do with that project, the only other thing could possibly be that it's a victim service provider that you're funding now that you didn't fund before, and you'll have to remember to add that person to the VSP HMIS contacts. You'll have to add the contact person there. But if that person is not, if the new project is not a victim service provider, it's already in one of the HMISs you identified, you're not going to really have to do anything else but just add the project here. Next slide, please. And finally, we know that you have projects that have ended already. So if the project ended anytime between when you started and now, you're going to pick the month that that project ended and close out the project. So how you do that is you click this project ended button. It's going to open up the field that allows you to check that it is an ended project. And then you're going to put the month that it ends in. When we start projects late, they're always going to start on the first of the month. When we end projects early, they're always going to end at the end of the month, even if there's a few days lag time there in how you exactly funded it. But that's how we're going to report it, so that so that we can keep as many in the same bundles as possible. So if you are starting projects later, you really want to tell them to start on the first day of the month. And if they're ending, you really want to take them all the way through the end of any given month. Should I stop for questions, folks?
I think most of our questions are currently being answered through the chat, so I think we're doing all right at this point.
Okey-doke. The next slide, please. The financial information form has been a challenge for many of you, and especially for the states. But I want to just go through this for a minute with you. The financial report in SAGE identifies funds expended, not funds drawn. So you don't need to have paid the bill, have reimbursed your subrecipient, or even yourself to identify funds expended. All expenditures that were made by the recipient or subrecipient for the reporting period are supposed to be included in ESG-CV report. And so by the end of the year, we really want you to report everything that you have spent money on, including admin and HMIS. So it's not just the subrecipients' money that you're gathering and putting in these reports. It's the admin money too. And far, far, far more of you reported that you hadn't spent any money at all than we really think is the case. So please put your, please make sure that you're reporting every expenditure that you have. It's really important for HUD and honestly for all of us that are doing homeless work to be able to show that this $4 billion that we received actually was needed and is getting used. And right now that's pretty tough. So we need you to really step up on this and get the financial information in. The total reported funds that you show as expended may exceed the funds drawn from IDIS because you don't have to draw them. There's nobody sitting in the field office that's going to balance your quarterly report with your draws in IDIS. That should not happen ever to you. So we really need the funds expended, even if you haven't drawn them. To be able to report the financial information, HUD recommends that you're asking subrecipients to submit reports to you on a regular basis. Monthly is nice, but definitely at least quarterly. You can't wait till the end of the year to have them submit all this stuff because you need to know how much they've expended. For the months following the end of the quarter, HUD recommends that the recipient require all their subrecipients to submit their financial data no later than the 15th of the month. So we had this problem again, like the quarter is going to end, this reporting period is going to end at the end of December. By January 15th, you should have the reports from your subrecipients that indicate what funds they have expended. And you should be able to give yourself enough time then to look at those and say, oh gosh, this is not right, I don't want to include this or whatever, and to aggregate those data so that you actually can complete the financial form in HUD. The financial form, has the categories that you're reporting in. There is absolutely no reason why the subrecipients aren't given a form that looks at least sort of like what you have to report, so you're getting the information from them in the same way that you're reporting. We have an Excel spreadsheet if you need that. I would assume that you've already put your financials out in place, but if you want a copy of that Excel spreadsheet, if you put in an AAQ, we're happy to send it to you.
Michelle, I'm going to jump in here for a second because this is really important. We've seen this in the chat as well, which is I love to see because that's helpful. So that piece on expenditures, I can't put a fine enough point on, like, we care about expenditures for the purposes of the reporting. It's not about the draws. And we do want you to report the expenditures just like the client served during that period. So I'll give you one core reason why that's going to be important, that you try to get that as close as possible. We get inquiries from the Hill, from members of Congress, from the White House, from various folks who, to some extent, control our funding, and they ask, what's going on in X community? Tell me, what have they spent on, right? Like, that sounds crazy sometimes that they get into that, but they do. We do get those questions. We are solely relying on that report. We are not going to send you a separate emailing saying, hey, I just want to make sure your report is right. No, we're going to take that report, and we're going to say, according to the last report, you served X number of people, you spent this amount of money. Right now, there is a lot of interest in this. So we strongly encourage you to make sure all of that is current. because it actually has an impact. It is important. We also want to know, right? So we created this provision to make sure you add back expenses for the previous period, for instance. We did that because we know there are some practical realities to getting the data, especially financial data, from your subrecipients. That's not easy. We definitely know that. That is a hard process. But at the same time, we do expect you to do your best to get all of it, right? I don't want you to think, oh, there's a process that allows us to report it later. No, that is not the right way to approach this. If it's impossible to get it for one or two projects, that's just the reality. But if you're not getting it for everyone, that means there's a problem with your process. And you need to change your process so you can get that information to accurately report. So I don't want to push too hard on that, but at the same time, I want to be very clear. Our expectation is you report on all finances, all activities during the quarter for the appropriate reporting period. So hopefully that puts a fine point on what we're really expecting out of this.
And then either William or Michelle, since there was some confusion about this in the chat, can we just say out loud exactly, again, the name of the quarters and when project start dates are determined by, and whether that's how that relates to the expenditures?
Yeah, I think the best place to get clarity on this is actually in the guidance, and we probably can post that here. It actually lists and names each quarter, so I know that's a little confusing, and we're sorry about that. The initial period, the one that went through September 30th, 2020, is called the initial period. Every quarter after that is named on the sequence of those quarters. So quarter 1, quarter 2, quarter 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, right, all the way until the end. It's not based on the federal calendar or even local calendar. It is just, look, this is your first quarterly, or really your after initial report. It is your first report, Q1. That's going to be your first cumulative report. There's a reason that Q1 is tied in there, because you will, in the first round, you reported on everything. But from here on out, you're going to report what you did in the quarter and what you've done cumulatively. So we'll want you to report that, and that's kind of why that Q1 sequencing happens after that. So sorry for any confusion on that. Look at the guidance if there's questions, and we're always happy to clarify that for you as well.
Do we have other financial questions that we need to answer, Rob? Or
we do have a couple of different financial questions that might be good to stop for at this moment. One of them, financial related, is how should the quarterly reports address the movement of funds between expenditure categories? That is, moving funds, for instance, between emergency shelter to RRH via requested amendment.
These are the monies you expended, so you would not have amended something to move the money between those projects. You might have needed to do that for IDIS for draws, but not for expenditures. So you're showing us exactly what you expended in the previous quarter. If what you find is that you totally messed up your initial period and you had it all in the wrong category, you need to put in an AAQ and tell us that, and we'll help you fix it. But otherwise, these are expenditures, and so you're actually going to put in what you as the recipient expended for admin and or HYS, what you maybe gave out to the HYS lead folks, and then what each one of those subrecipients has sent to you saying that that's what they expended.
Great. And then a shorter one here. Is the financial data entered by project, or is it projects combined by activity?
There's one financial report. There's one financial report in Sage. And when we finish this, I'll show you, they'll turn on my screen so I can show you Sage, and I'll bring up the financial report at that time. But you need to aggregate or combine all of your emergency shelter expenses, all of your rapid rehousing expenses, all of your homeless prevention, and then you submit all of them on one form. So each component has a section for you to report the expenses of that component.
Michelle, can I add on to that? Just to be clear, so if they submitted their initial report, now we're going into Q1. If they go back and paid for some of these new projects, back in the initial time period, they don't amend their initial period report. They simply add that funding into the Q1 report.
That is correct, Meredith. Thank you.
Thank you.
Great. No, I think this question kind of follows from that. But does the recipient as grant administrator need to put staff hours and expenses into admin combined with the subrecipient admin expenses?
Yep. All eligible admin expenses should be aggregated and reported accordingly.
Great. And then I think our last finance-related one at this point in time. So if a new agency is funded in January 2021 and they are allowed to submit expenses back to the initial start date, so their pre-award costs, do we need to edit our initial submission to account for the additional expenses incurred by the agency?
No, we're not going to edit anything. We're not going to amend anything. We're just going to put any expenses that you have incurred right now up to the end of the year that have not been reported before. You're going to report them as expended in this quarter.
Yeah, that was a decision we made to hopefully make your lives a little easier, especially with that initial report. We knew that you're still trying to figure out what your process is for collecting the financial data to try to figure out what's going on, what's the best way to do this going forward. We totally understood that. The last thing you need to do is amend an old report so that you can access a new report. We wanted to avoid that. So the whole idea here is you'll have a place to take note of any changes you make, but you'll make the changes in your cumulative report, essentially. That's where you'll document the total expenses. So that was our goal. We want to avoid you having to do extra work.
Great. And then we have one last one that's not financial related, but we can clear up at this time. And that was a question about whether victim service providers, if they have anywhere to select an option indicating that they do not have an HMIS comparable database when they receive the link from SAGE. What are VSP supposed to do?
Nope. By this point, HUD we've been through multiple rounds of ESG funding, and HUD created a one-time exception that, as we've said before on previous broadcasts for this, that one time went to 2 times, went to 3 times. We're not taking exceptions this time easily. So if you, the recipient, has funded a victim service provider that has not gotten a comparable database and you gave them money, we're not trying to not give money to victim service providers, but we're saying they do have to report like everybody else. And so if you have given somebody funding that cannot generate this report, you're going to need to develop a plan with them that includes a specific date by which they will have that funding. In order to turn on the exception template, you're not going to be able to do that yourself. You're going to have to put in an AAQ. We're going to send you some questions back that you're going to need to very specifically answer. But the questions are essentially what's the plan and what's the date. We're going to enter the date in SAGE that you expect that they would be on, and that's the date then by which they must be on, and the SAGE won't let them upload an exception template any longer. So we will provide exception templates only if really, really necessary. And we ask many of you to really check with your victim service providers that they don't have one, because we found a whole lot of states where the state has checked that none of the victim service providers had comparable databases, and when we turned and looked at the actual uploads, they were all coming in from comparable databases. So please check with your victim service provider before you just ask for that exception, because a lot of them don't need it anymore.
Well, and something to kind of build on that is we've encouraged you to reach out to partners, add partners, and a lot of that is going to come from the domestic violence space. They are great partners, and we're encouraging you to do that. But again, as Michelle said, there's not absolved from the compliance piece. They may not have a comparable database when you offer the award, right? That's definitely possible, but we ask that you work with them. That's going to put more onus on you as the recipient to work with them to get a comparable database. You can use ESG-CV funding. Again, we're not doing any specialized databases here. You can't go and make a database whole cloth, but you can buy something off the shelf that will be compliant. We encourage you to do that. So hopefully it's a flag for you as the recipient to say, well, it looks like we might have a data problem here. I need to engage with my subrecipient, have this conversation about what we need to do to support that and ensure that we can get compliance. And again, it may take a little while, right? You might not be available right away. That's fine. We recognize that. Again, we want folks to come to the table. It's not fine to say, well, they're not compliant now. I don't know that they'll ever be. That doesn't work. You actually need to have a game plan for coming into compliance. And I kind of see this as an opportunity, right? Like, we want victim service providers at the table. We want them to have working comparable databases. This is a good moment to take advantage of the funding, to give them that opportunity to come into compliance, because they're great partners, and we want them in further reporting, right? If they get COC funding or more ESG funding in the future, this just builds the backbone to make that possible. So we're grateful for that.
Great. Well, that I think clears out our questions at the moment, so we can move forward then.
Super. Can we go to the next slide then, please? So I just want to review bundles with you, because if you didn't do this last time, maybe you forgot how this works. We're taking the data up in bundles to avoid counting the same client in the same component multiple times. If the same guy stays in 5 different shelters over the course of a year, we really don't want to count him as 5 people being served. We really want to count him as 1 person being served. And by bundling, we're able to do that, to get it down to the 1 person being served. So a bundle is all of the projects in your community that you funded with ESG-CV that are of the same component. Component is emergency shelter, rapid rehousing, homelessness prevention. They all have the same start and end dates. So it either shows a start and the project is ongoing, or it'll show the start and the end date. And if they have the same start and end date, they'll be in a bundle. And they're from a single HMIS or victim service provider's comparable database system. If they meet those factors, SAGE is going to put them in a bundle. We are going to release a supplemental guidance piece. And at the end of that piece, that should be out really pretty soon, you'll see a chart that shows you how SAGE is bundling a group of projects. And what you see when you look at that chart is it's a nightmare for you to have to figure out yourself. We are not asking you to do that. We're not asking the HMIS lead to do that. SAGE is going to do it for you. And as long as you put the correct start dates and end dates in the system, you have the project in the right component, you have it assigned to the right HMIS, the bundle is going to Sage will generate those bundles within minutes and show you what's where and be able to send those out to your leads. So the leads don't have to create the bundles, and nor do you. We're going to tell you what to create. What we need the lead to do is to actually pull the data for the specific projects that we're asking for with report start and end date that will show them we need to have. We refer to bundles whether they're a single project or they have hundreds of projects in them. Either way, we're calling it a bundle. Beginning with this report, this Q1 report, all the projects will be in two different bundles. So there's a quarterly bundle that just is reporting in the activity that was provided this quarter, and then there's a cumulative bundle that reports on all persons ever served with ESG-CV funding. And the cumulative bundles are the ones that are really going to change as you put new projects on and bring projects off. And so those aren't necessarily as standard as the quarterly bundles might be, because there's probably not as much going on and off during a quarter as there would be over the course of time. When the recipient sends the email from Sage with the portal link, the HMIS lead or the victim service provider contact gets an actual list of every project that they're supposed to pull in a single report with the date range of that report. And then they upload that, and then they'll get the next one. So they only get on their portal, everything that they have to pull from you is visible to them all at one time. It's really, really, really important that we give the HMIS and victim service provider contacts enough time to do this. As we were coming into this call, I heard from a TA provider that there have been a number of HMIS leads that are so overwhelmed with the amount of work that they have to do right now for the COC, for the competition, for other kinds of reports that they're doing, and adding this onto their plate. They just can't produce it in a day. So we ask you to please be sure that you're giving them enough time to be able to do this. Next slide, please. So with that, one of the big problems we had last year was recipients that decided to send out their bundles at the end of the reporting period. So they waited until like the 25th day of the month to send them out. The bundles are locked for 3 days. We give you 3 days to so that nobody can upload into Sage any data for 3 days, so that and it's 3 business days, so that the HMIS lead can check what they've got, and if there's a problem, come back to you, tell you, you yourself can unbundle them, you can correct the projects, do whatever you need to correct it, resend it out to folks, and get it back in a timely fashion. We had multiple people at the end of last quarter asking us to remove the 3-day limit, because if we didn't remove the 3-day limit, they weren't going to make the deadline for submission. We had a bunch of them ask us to pull back in reports because, whoops, they realized they made a mistake on like the 20th and wanted to start all over again. So we're giving you a suggested timeline. You don't have to use this, but it puts in perspective all that needs to be accomplished. So right now, today, you could be working on your Q1 report. As long as you submitted last time, it's open for you and available for you to be entering projects right now. We're hoping that by the 5th day of the month, you're able to have everything entered and send it out. The projects that you put in last time are there now, so they auto-populate for you. You don't have to go through typing all the stuff in every time. So the only thing that you have to do is to add the new projects or close the project by the 5th day of the month. And so we're hoping that you can do that. That would mean that you would send that out and press send on day 5. On day 6, 7, 8, and 9, on day 6, 7, and 8, the system is locked so that it allows people to check their data and be able to put it in, and they will not be able then to upload it until day 9. It could be longer than day 9 if day 5 is Friday and you have to wait through the weekend too. So it's 3 business days that it stays locked for corrections to be made. Again, a suggestion, give them at least 5 days to upload it. So if you've sent it to them on the 5th, then you're saying you'd like it back on the 15th. And when you set your date that you want it back, you would set your date as the 15th. That gives you time for them to be late, for you to review what's going on, and for everything else to happen that has to happen. We're recommending that at least by day 20 you have those financial expenditures from the recipient. The previous slide said day 15, and you're better off if you do the 15th rather than the 20th, but no later than the 20th do you need to have those financial expenditures back from your subrecipients so that you can add them together, make corrections, review them, and put them in. And the submission deadline is day 30, and the submission does not automatically happen in Sage because the uploads were made or because all of the forms were completed. You actually have to submit the form to HUD. So you have to go in and finish and do that sign and submit form so that it actually will be able to go and be sent into HUD. And, you know, we've had folks forget to do that on regular ESG, and we're seeing that even in ESG-CV we're still having a little bit of that. So please be sure that when you think it's done, you've actually pressed the button and sent it in. Next slide, please. Some mistakes to avoid, we're trying to help you learn from everything we learned the first time. Please ensure that the HMIS and VSP contact forms are correct. We've had a number of people say that their victim service provider didn't get it because the address was bad, or something else happened that caused us then to bring back in that bundle and send it back out again, or send out the link to you to be able to do that. It's a form to complete for HMIS or victim service providers. Unless they are victim service providers, those are not a list of your subrecipients. I know this sounds silly for me to say this again, but we've had a number of you that have done reporting before put in all of your subrecipients instead of the HMIS lead. So this is very different than what you normally do in ESG reporting, where you do put in the subrecipients and get it from them. Because of the bundles, it has to go to the HMIS lead, so you don't put a list of subrecipients in. The only time a subrecipient is on that list is if they're a victim service provider. And then contacts are not you. Again, I know that sounds silly, but I cannot tell you how many of you think that you need to upload for somebody else because they can't somehow do it correctly. What happens when you decide to do that is that there is no check or balance in place. And what we found in almost every case is that when the recipient listed themselves as the contact and decided to do the upload themselves because they had access to HMIS data and could pull the reports themselves, or because within their office HMIS was running and so they were also the HMIS lead, and so they decided they would just pull the reports and put them in themselves. In every case that happened, there was an error made. We had to unbundle and re-upload everything. And that happened because there was no check and balance. And so part of this is that we do realize that it's a complex system. The more projects you fund, the more complex it is. Some of you states have hundreds of projects that you're funding. And so the check and balance really is the HMIS lead, and we're hopeful that you take advantage of that and use that. To avoid late submissions, if you can send your bundle request early, remember to allow for that 3-day hold. That 3-day hold is really important. Gather the expenditure information from in-house sources too, and not just your subrecipients. We had we had folks that were saying, oh, we only had subrecipients spend money. But all the time, that I spent figuring out who was getting the money and all of that admin stuff that was going on, no, we didn't account for that. You really want to make sure you're accounting for everything that you're going to actually draw. And then make sure that the data entry and account admin user in Sage, that there is somebody in from your recipient that can do that. You don't want to get to the last day and find that there's nobody around who can submit the report to HUD. The report has to be a data entry or account admin user in Sage, and there's a little report on the bottom of your dashboard called Users at an Entity. If you run that report, you'll see exactly who's a user in Sage and exactly what user level they have, whether it's data entry or data viewer or account admin. And the biggest tip we can give you is to start now on your reporting. In the spirit of the season, we're going to ask you to make your list and check it twice before you send out the bundles, because we've also had folks that just flat out forgot to put a project in, and so everything needed to come back because of that. So if you make your list of how many projects you've got and you check it twice, and you have funded 100 projects, then Sage, before you bundle, Sage is going to show you have 100 projects, and that hopefully is helpful to you. Next slide, please.
Michelle, while we're on that, there's actually two related questions here that we can clear up. First is about editing those bundles. If there's an error in the project list, but the HMIS lead doesn't catch it and notify the recipient during that lockdown window, is there a way to edit only that bundle, or do you have to delete and resend all the bundles?
If they identify the mistake during the 3-day hold kind of period, you can unbundle it, fix it, and resend it, and nothing, that's not a big deal to do that. So if it's within that 3-day period, you can do it yourself. If it's outside of that 3-day period, and because data at that point has probably started coming into the system, then you've got to go through the AAQ so we can figure out how to untangle the mess, and we can unbundle just that one bundle for you and fix it, or we can unbundle 2 bundles maybe if they need it and fix it, and then you won't have to send them all out again. But if you do it in the 3-day period, you can do it yourself.
Great. And then we had Jessica was concerned about people being out of the office for a week or so, and wondering if there's a way that bundles can be sent to more than one person, or can the email only go to one person?
The email can only go to one person, and we've encouraged the HMIS leads and victim service providers can do this too, although some of them have some pretty bad email systems, to actually send it to a group email. So, for example, in my office, if you send an email to info@partnershipcenter.net, it's going to go to 3 people, and all 3 of us are going to get that email. So we're encouraging you to, and we encourage the HMIS leads to do that too, so that if they needed, if somebody was sick, if somebody was on vacation, if whatever, that it would go to multiple people in their office.
Great, thanks. That's it for now.
Okay, I think then the final thing we have before we take questions or do screen sharing if you need that is about the Ask a Question. So again, if you put in all SAGE technical assistance is provided to you via Ask a Question. If you select SAGE in that step 2 of the Ask a Question process, it will get to our desk right away. It won't have to go through other desks and be popped around because the desk was wrong and people didn't know what you were talking about. So if you would pick SAGE, our timeline has been that we're answering them almost always the same day, but always within a couple of days. And so unless it's a really complicated issue, we should be right on it for you. Having said that, there are 400 recipients, so it's a daunting task sometimes. One of the things that we found last time was that you didn't realize that we could fix something for you. And the clearer you are with what the problem is, the more likely it is that we can fix it for you without having to do AAQ tag, where we're going back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. So we try not to do that. We will pick up the phone and call you if it's a complex issue. So the more complete your information is in the AAQ itself, the better we have to help you. So if you would write out what the problem is, give us the bundle name and the projects that need to be deleted if you need to delete something. If SAGE is showing some kind of error, provide a copy of the error. Like they can't upload because of something, give us the error. Tell us what exactly is wrong. We have some ability to look and see what's going on behind the scenes, and so the more information you give us, the better chance you have of getting an answer from us that meets your needs. And if somebody's having an issue uploading, like your victim service provider, if you explain very clearly again what bundle that is, we can actually look at the rejected CSV file and tell you maybe what's wrong with the file to have it corrected. So again, information is critical. And in this time of COVID, we recognize that many of you are not in your office, and the AAQ form is a pre-filled out form, so your phone number is there. We will pick up the phone and call you if we can get it done faster that way, but it's really helpful if you give us a phone number where we can reach you in the text of your email, or in text of your AAQ, so that when we call you, we're not leaving a voice message on an office machine that won't get picked up for a couple of days. So if you really have what you think is a complex issue, be sure you give us a phone number that we can reach you at. And with that, I think that's the end of our presentation, and we're open for questions.
We've got one here in the chat about editing uploaded files. Once files have been loaded by the HMIS lead, is there any way to replace those files with new ones without unbundling and submitting an AAQ to have those files removed?
Nope. The HMIS, I mean, that's a short answer, but the HMIS lead, before they upload, they go through a process where they actually have to match every project in that you, the recipient, have asked them to provide with what's actually in the HMIS upload. And so that check and balance is there so that by the time they upload, it should be right.
Great. I don't see any other questions that we haven't addressed through the chat. If I missed anyone's questions along the way, now would be a good time to re-ask that, because I've just missed it.
So William has switched with Marlisa, I believe, and if you have questions for her, she's also available.
I'm not sure if this is technically feasible the way we have WebEx set up today, Michelle, but you did mention that you would bring up a financial report at the end. There was some interest in seeing one of those.
Yes, I can do that. Tommy, Joe, will you give me control of the screen sharing?
You now have control.
Thank you. So I'm just picking a random. This is our test system, and so nothing is live in here. You're not really looking at Bakersfield's report. The financial form looks like this. So if you've submitted previously, that's all pre-filled, and once you submit here, then it will give you a total in this total field. So it's just giving you a running total of all you've spent this quarter plus previous submissions. So you'll be able to enter in this quarter, in Q1, you'll be able to go back and enter anything in the initial period or this quarter that you put in there. And I can add a note saying that up here in the complete financial information section to remind you of that. There were questions about how do you do expenditures. All the expenditures are coming in by component. So if you funded 10 homeless prevention projects, you're going to have to add up all the money that homeless prevention spent on rental housing and put it in here. At the bottom, you'll see that admin is here and HMIS is here, and training as a unique activity if it's not funded under one of these components. For example, you trained everybody all at once, right at the beginning of COVID. You did a huge training in your community for all of the providers. You can put that training in this other expenditures if you need to. Otherwise, if you just spent money to train the shelters, you would put, or street outreach projects, you would put training there.
And Michelle, just to follow up on that too, it doesn't matter if it's round 1 or round 2 funding for the ESG-CV. All of the funds get reported together, correct?
That's right. That's right. None of this worries about round 1 or round 2.
Just coming in here from Lee, and this financial report is what the grantee completes for all agencies funded / HMIS COC leads, or is this what the COC leads are putting together?
Okay, so the COC has, unless the COC, no, this is a form that the recipient completes. If you, the recipient, have funded a COC as the subrecipient, then the subrecipient is funding their shelters in their community, then that subrecipient is going to send it to you, but you're going to, if that's what you did and you funded 10 different COCs as subrecipients, then you're still going to have to add all 10 of those COCs reports together. Again, I'm answering this as if you're a state that has lots of activity going on. It's much easier for the cities and counties to do this without that kind of worrying. But in this case, in a state, you're going to have to add them together, and it is not the COC's job to report ESG-CV. As William said in the beginning, the COC really has no role in this unless you decided they were the subrecipient.
Great. And does the order that they fill out the financial form versus the bundling matter? Can they complete the finance portion prior to the bundle?
You can. You absolutely can. You could complete the financial portion now. As long as you have the reporting requirements filled in, you can, and they indicate that you've spent money somewhere, that financial form will open and you'll be able to put finances in whenever you want to do that. You can also fill out the allowable activity, and you can fill out why the project was missing if you know you've got missing projects too, why you didn't submit them last period. Other questions?
I'm not seeing one here on the chat. Again, if I'm missing your question or if someone still has a question.
I did want to just, hi, this is Marlisa. I just wanted to comment on Lee's question or statement about knowing the details based on reimbursements. And I did want to draw the distinction between draws that you would make an IDIS for, like, in other words, reimbursements for any sort of reimbursement requests submitted by subrecipients and incurred costs. When we're asking for expenditures on the financial reporting section, we're actually asking for any sort of ESG incurred costs, not necessarily the amounts that you've already drawn and used to reimburse for ESG. So that's where additional follow-up with subrecipients is necessary to make sure that you're aware of all of the costs that they have incurred but not necessarily requested reimbursement for.
Are there other questions?
That's looking like it on my end.
Excellent. Then we'll give you back 20 minutes of your day. Please start your reporting process now before Christmas and the New Year's and all of that hits us. And we, on behalf of PCL and APT and HUD, we're wishing you all a very, very happy and safe holiday.